Good afternoon, folks. How are you? My name is Michael Dube. I'm the manager of Broadcast Systems Integrations at HBO, and I deal with linear and non-linear at HBO, which includes all of the HBO and Cinemax channels, and I deal with HBO Go and non-linear as well. One other aspect that I also work on is disaster recovery, which there was a big storm in New York over the last week. And so that's another aspect that I also deal with, is making sure that when these big storms hit, if we are unavailable in New York, that we can still continue to broadcast, so that, if we don't do that, we lose money. So just to give you a little insight as to what I do. Also, I work for ABC News. I dealt with all of the live and on demand for ABC News, including the nighttime cable VOD, all the video on demand for that. And lastly, I worked for Accenture for a couple of years. It's a big consulting company, and basically I was creating solutions for Fortune 500 all over the world for both linear and non-linear solutions. Today I want to talk to you about over-the-top television. I know that's been a topic today that has been pretty popular. By the way, folks, I only have about 40 minutes to speak to you until the next speaker comes up. So if I do have to cut it a little short, don't worry, I'll be waiting outside and I'll talk with anyone who has additional questions. What I would like is that while I'm speaking, if anyone has a question related to what I'm actually talking about, please raise your hand, and I'll try to answer your question and bring that into the conversation. If you have other questions about other things, please just wait and you can talk to me outside about that. I'd appreciate that. Over-the-top television. It's something that it's a very hot topic, and mainly really with the broadcasters. For quite a few years now, people have been experimenting with cutting the cord and trying to find ways to get their television and other methods. And I think for a long time the broadcast industry, including people that I've been working for, have been very resistant to that. We now realize that this is something that isn't going away, and you're seeing that all of the broadcasters are actually taking steps to try to offer their own over-the-top solutions as time goes on. And the reason for that is that they want to make the content available to you. They don't want you to go out and download it or torrent it or share it. They want to make that content available to you in one way or another. Of course, today there are big distribution agreements that companies like HBO and other big media companies have that sometimes fly in the face of that. A good example is HBO, where we have HBO Go. And one of the things I hear every day from people in the public is that they want HBO Go directly. They don't want to pay for, they don't want to pay their television company for HBO. They want to pay us for HBO. The problem is that we make our money off of those big distribution agreements. And a lot of those agreements last sometimes 10 and 20 years. So you can see where we struggle, even though we would love to sell you HBO directly, it's not something that we can do. Pretty much all of our money comes from these big distribution agreements. And so why am I sort of mentioning that is because I feel like there's probably a lot of you here today that are interested in, how can if you're creating your own content, how can you get it out there? And for many of you, you don't have an option to go to a big network and say, hey, I'd love for you to purchase my content and display it on your channel. So how do you do that? A lot of folks use YouTube, and really that was sort of the big first mainstream OTT that happened out in the industry. And today, big media companies, even when they have their own OTT solution, can't ignore YouTube. YouTube is just too big, and even though YouTube is free, there's still money associated with that, right? If we get enough views, you can make money from YouTube. Switch to the next slide here. I have a quote here from some Accenture research from last year. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but essentially Accenture did research with all of the major MSOs, both in the US and around the world. And their research is confirming that, yes, indeed, all of these big companies have to come up with some sort of strategy surrounding OTT. For those of you who might not know, OTT is a way to get your content by bypassing your cable and your satellite companies. So traditionally that's via IP. Basically, if you have an internet connection, we will, you can have access to that content if somebody makes it available to you. So here we have, here's a quote here from Steve Shannon from Roku. Basically, the research that they're doing is showing that by the year 2016, there's going to be 538 million devices out there that have capability of receiving OTT content. So as time goes on, we're finding that people less and less are using their computers. They're using more and more mobile devices as time goes on. For a lot of people, these mobile devices end up being their computing devices. They're spending more money on phones than they are on laptops. And often these phones and mobile devices are more powerful than the laptops that they're buying. Your phone is on you all the time. Why is this important? Because folks who are looking for to consume media want to do so across multiple platforms, right? Netflix is what everyone compares their potential solutions to. When they want a product offering, consumers expect something very similar to Netflix. They expect that the content is going to be available to them at any time across multiple devices with a user experience that provides a continuity for that usability. So if I finish watching or I stop halfway on my cell phone and then I switch to my laptop or my television, I want to be able to pick up where I left off, and I want a user experience that is nearly identical across all of these platforms and devices. I just threw this slide up quickly. This is sort of a generic OTT workflow. You can sort of see on your left there that there's a lot of places and sources that the video can come from. And these days, it's more and more, it's nonlinear, it's file-based. So for instance, at HBO, when we're getting content, ideally we're getting that as a digital file instead of a tape. But we're still getting tapes, in 2012. And we have this humongous tape library. We're actually in the middle of trying to convert that tape library to something completely digital with a very, very high quality format that we're hoping will last for many years to come. We've picked a codec that the file sizes are humongous, but again, this is our main format, and we use this format not only to go out to air, to play out on servers that go out on the linear stations, but we use that same file to transform that asset into many, many, many flavors. These days, I think we're doing about 11 different on-demand platforms, including Xbox, laptops, Android phones, iOS, and Kindle Fire, I think, was the latest one that we put out. We've got some plans, too, for the future devices that are coming out. And for us, HBO Go, and by the way, the availability across all of these devices is through HBO Go. HBO Go is not something that we make money off of directly. HBO Go is an add-on. And so even though we've built a solution that people out there think is great and they use as that sort of, it's another Netflix baseline. We want something that works like Netflix. We want something that works like HBO Go. We don't make any money off of that. That's a value add to Netflix, and we do that to, at least for the future, for the near future, and that could be 5, 10, 15 years, is to help to satisfy these big distribution agreements that we have with your major MSOs. And folks, MSO stands for multi-systems operators. So MSOs are companies that will often offer you multiple services. So your internet and your cable and your phone, those are called MSOs. We can see here, though, that once you have your content, you have this stuff that's in the middle here. And really, because from an OTT perspective, you need to be able to organize your content. It's not just transforming it. You need to be able to organize it, and really that system needs to also be able to schedule content as well. And so generally, most of the providers out there, if you're building it yourself or if you're paying somebody else, you're outsourcing it. Generally, They're letting you ingest your content, they're letting you manage the content, they're letting you transform it to many different formats, and then they're giving you players and portals that will go out to across all of your devices to build that seamless user experience. And the idea really is that in the middle there, where you're organizing your content, you're getting an economy of scale, at least in terms of organizing your content. You want to be able to organize it once and have it go out across all of the devices. There's a lot of companies that provide this type of service today. There's also a lot of companies that are building this stuff in-house on their own. HBO is an example of a company that we do all of this in-house. We don't outsource any of this. And really, for us, it's not an economic decision. It's more of a quality control decision. Before I worked for HBO, I actually pitched to HBO to help build out parts of HBO Go. And HBO was really happy about that, except when it came down to quality control. That's a huge issue for us, and that's why we build out a lot of our stuff in-house, ingesting all of the stuff, and when we need to distribute it either to HBO Go or internationally, or to cable companies so they can have the cable video on demand, we're handling all of that. But there are companies out there that can assist with this through a lot of this process and help make your content available to go out wherever you need it to. I'll just speak quickly about target devices. This is pretty self-explanatory. But when you're deciding on your target devices, there can be an economy of scale sometimes. For instance, if you encode or transcode for Roku, it's the same format that iOS uses. Doesn't mean it's the same resolution, but often those devices can be graceful, especially the iOS devices can be graceful about shrinking or expanding content, and it still looks good. So there are times that you can find economies of scale. In other words, you don't have to necessarily transcode across to every device. The problem is, though, is that your transcoding process, I'm pointing to the last slide, your transcoding process and your storage of these assets when you have it ready to get out to your customers, that's not expensive in the grand scheme of things. What's actually very expensive is the delivery of the media. There's definitely some considerations when you're picking your different targets. Where do you want all your media to go out to? Traditionally, some of the questions that I would be asking people about would be stuff about DRM. Are you transcoding in one system? Do you need multiple systems because they have different capabilities to create your content? You definitely, and in my opinion, one of the biggest factors is delivery costs. And that's a big deal, especially here in Brazil. A lot of your major CDNs, which cache content globally to try to get it as close to the end viewer as possible for delivery, Brazil has always actually been problematic, and most of your major CDNs don't have. It's only really been recently that they're starting to build out more and more of a presence here. As you guys are getting your internet bandwidth further and further up, and from what I've been speaking to people, it's getting a lot better. But it's always been a problem to deliver here to Brazil. There's very few CDNs, very few solutions that will help get the content here to store in Brazil to deliver to you guys locally. And often what you're doing is if you're watching a Netflix or a Hulu, most of the time you're pulling that from Miami, which is pretty far away. And so your viewer experience can suffer. You hit, I want to watch this asset, sometimes it takes longer than what you're happy with to start viewing that. So that's, the delivery is a big deal. If you wait too long before the video starts to play, people just leave, they move on, they go elsewhere. And at the end of the day, if you're trying to monetize out your content, you need to keep people there. So delivery costs is one of the in my opinion, one of the two major factors when you're considering an over-the-top solution. Your ability to organize content, you need a CMS. If any of you have ever dealt with websites and making websites, you know what a CMS is. It's a content management system. Video needs one too. You need the ability to organize your content. What if you want to change titles, descriptions, if you want to set when the content appears and disappears, you don't want to have to be there hitting delete when you want the content to not be available anymore. You want to be able to schedule that. It's very important to have a system that can handle all of your content like that. And I'll get to that in just a moment. licensing issues is a big deal. HBO, you know, for instance, if we wanted to sell directly to you, we can't right now. And why can't we? We have existing licensing agreements that prohibit our ability to do that with you guys. But why is that important? For some of you who are either just, you're creating content and you want to create your own OTT offering, or you're an existing media company and maybe you're about to renegotiate some of your contracts. A lot of those contracts are like 10 and 20-year contracts, meaning that when we first penned them, they weren't considering the internet at the time. So there's people just, sorry, I'm struggling for the words here for a second. When you're renegotiating those contracts, you now definitely have to be considering not only the internet, but you sort of have to be trying to consider the future devices that are coming out. You need to be thinking of the new platforms. You need to make sure that your licensing agreements accommodate for the future, where a lot of the legacy agreements have not done that. And that's why you have folks that, to give you an example, HBO Go is only on demand, but HBO has been, for a couple of years now, making a feed available, a live feed of HBO and Cinemax to be included in HBO Go. That's not something that we're charging for, but the MSOs that we have agreements with, they're the ones that have pushed back and have said, we don't want live content in HBO Go. We are paying for that live content. We want to be the ones who are offering that. We want the viewers to come to us for that. An interesting statistic for HBO Go is that 80% of people who pay for HBO, when they want to watch HBO content on demand, they go to HBO Go to watch that. They don't go to their cable box, to the video on demand and watch it that way. It's the HBO Go experience is compelling enough that even though the content is available in multiple places legally for you to have, people are choosing to go to HBO Go because of that experience. The experience is important. Usability is important. Meeting people's expectations are important. And so, you know, these are all things that we need to consider. Market share also, you know, are you going to develop for, you know, a gaming console to offer your video on a gaming console when that gaming console is rapidly losing market share? You need to be smart about your future decisions about where you want to get your content out to. These days, if you're a big company, you're going to build it yourself. HBO builds all of our stuff ourselves. Most people shouldn't build it themselves. It doesn't make sense, unless you're a big company, it doesn't make sense for you to try to build this type of solution from scratch. There's lots of options out there for people that are low cost, all the way up to millions of dollars. Some of the popular, I'd say, basic CMS companies that will offer you that workflow. Brightcove, Permission TV, VideoEgg, YouTube, Juice, Uyala, Longtail Video, Tavinci, and NexusStream. A lot of these folks also offer DRM. And if any of you don't know what DRM is, it's digital rights management. It's the ability to protect your content. So for folks especially that are dealing with licensing agreements that we have to stick to and existing business arrangements, often DRM is a requirement. There's some free CDNs out there. If you're just starting out and you're trying to get your content out to folks, these are places that you want to look at first. They often won't have advanced feature sets, but it's free. And this is the delivery part. The delivery is the most costly part of an OTT solution, actually getting it there. I've built solutions for multi-million-dollar companies, and they see how much it's going to cost, and they say, great. And then when they find out how much the delivery is, they don't want to do it. I didn't get to listen to the entire ESPN panel, but I did hear that they were broadcasting a bunch of linear channels over OTT. I think that's amazing. I've had companies that wanted 30 to 60 to 100 linear OTT channels in a portal. And traditionally, it's just cost prohibitive. A 24/7 live stream like that to millions of people, those delivery costs can be outrageous. Here's some more traditional CDNs. Probably the couple of big ones here are Akamai, Level 3, and Limelight, at least in the US. A lot of these other CDNs are great too. And by the way, folks, a lot of these CDNs can also help point you to a CMS or a company that can help you to build a solution if that's something that you're looking to do. I just have a list of telco CDNs here. The reason why this is important is because if you think about it, a lot of these telcos are also offering you internet access. So when you're talking about delivery, one thing that HBO has been exploring with a lot of the telcos who we have agreements with, they're broadcasting HBO, is that for HBO Go, for their customers, we would love to find a way to get an AT&T or a Comcast to actually deliver that content. And the reason being is that there's little to no cost for them because they own that last mile infrastructure. Their facilities are close to you. They own the lines that go into your house. If it's a case where we can put storage in these locations and then feed you the video, it gives you a better user experience and it lowers our cost dramatically because we're paying companies like Akamai, Limelight, Level 3, and more. We use multiple CDNs. We're paying them outrageous sums of money. And don't get me wrong, they're worth what they do. We could not replicate what these folks do. And what these companies are doing is they're setting up like hundreds or thousands in some cases of instances of your content across the world so that when I request it in Brazil, ideally I'm getting it in Brazil. If I'm in France and I request the same content, I don't want it from Brazil, I don't want it from the US, I want it from France. And ideally, I want it from a location in France that's closest to me. So these companies are providing these solutions. They're not cheap. Again, you can check out the free ones first, but often when you want your advanced OTT functionality, you have to go with, you're not going to get a free CDN at that point. A big deal, I think, for Brazil too is the commercial CDNs using P2P. P2P is file sharing, so it's sort of like on the same idea of torrents, where you're looking for a file and you're pulling it from people who are, many different people who have the same content. These are a few CDNs that actually, when they give you the portal, and they give you an embed code for players and apps, that they have the ability, and not necessarily on cell phones, but certainly on laptops and desktops, if I watch a piece of content and my next door neighbor wants to watch the same piece of content, instead of re-requesting the content from the storage and paying for a second delivery or a third or fourth or fifth delivery, that some of that bit, some of that file can come from me on my computer. That lowers your cost dramatically because you're not paying a CDN for that traffic. That traffic is just free traffic between my computer and your computer. At the end of the day, and if you read this quote here, it's from Gerald Abraham, I always butcher his last name, Abrahamian. And he's at NBC Universal. This is a company that has big distribution agreements. And for them, their end goal is trying to drive traffic back to television. And why? Because that's where the ad dollars really count. These days, online advertising barely keeps the lights on. So if your only source of income is ads for your OTT solution, I hope you can keep running and you can keep going because you're not going to make enough money to be profitable. You're barely going to make enough money to cover those delivery costs. But for those of us that don't have big distribution agreements, you can start to get creative sometimes. And I think that when we're talking about advertising, there's a lot of different things that we have to be concerned about, I think. And as the content owner, you want to make sure that you're finding the right advertiser. It sounds strange, but if you're coming to watch my video and I put an ad and you're a man and I put an ad for like female products, you're not going to care. In fact, you might leave. You're definitely going to ignore the ad. You might move on to something else, and then I've lost you as a viewer. I've lost you being able to watch some of those ads that are going to help to generate some money, and you're certainly not going to watch any of my other stuff because you've moved on to go someplace else. The shorter your content, the shorter your ads need to be, depending on, and you have to figure out the sweet spot with your own customers. And that involves metrics, by the way. You have to be able to track this stuff and know what's going on. But if your content is shorter, you need shorter ads. There are people that have found that you can have a 2-minute ad, I'm sorry, a 2-minute piece of content, and you can probably show 1 or 2 15-second ads and people won't leave. But try showing a 60-second ad in front of a 2-minute piece. Honestly, after I left ABC, I went to abcnews.com and I went to watch a 45-second video and they showed me a 2-minute ad. I got 10 seconds into the ad and I left. And I went to another site to watch a news item on the same information that didn't make me wait 2 minutes. But at the end of the day, I know that ABC needs their ads. So, you know, it's a struggle. It's definitely a struggle to figure out and understand your customers. And I think that's why, and I'll skip down, that metrics is so important. And in my experience, metrics is an afterthought. You need to know what's going on with your campaigns. You need to know how they're performing. If you own a website, you care about how many hits you get. You care about your traffic. It's the same thing with video, and especially if you're concerning yourself with advertising, the metrics is so very important. And it's not just basic metrics. Ideally, you need to be able to drill in and see how different assets are performing in different parts of the world or country. You need to know the ads that might be dynamically associated with that, which ads are working with which pieces, and you need to sort of have, ideally, a game plan so that you can be tweaking that. And again, there's no perfect recipe. It takes time, but it takes information, and for you to get that information, you need metrics. Device-specific policies. On a tablet or mobile device, people aren't willing to watch as many ads. That's what we found. Not so much at HBO, but at my other workplaces. If somebody's watching on a laptop or desktop, you can actually serve them more ads, and they are more willing to sit through that than if they're on their phone. So again, your ad campaigns need to think about which devices you're going out to, and also you need to have the ability to tweak that so that different devices might get different sort of not just different ad campaigns, but sort of different formulations of ad campaigns. And live content, by the way, advertising and live content is king. If you want to be ad-driven, if your content is live, people will stick around because it's live content. On-demand content, you can struggle to put ads in there and to keep those eyeballs. And that's why with on-demand content, it's that much more important to understand your audience and be able to target them with the right ads. Protecting your content. For big media companies, for people who have existing fiduciary agreements, money relationships with people to give them their content already, often if you want to serve that in an OTT style, you need to concern yourself with DRM. These days, 3 major DRMs, it's Google Widevine, Microsoft PlayReady, and Adobe Access. Widevine is free these days, at least from a licensing perspective, but any of these that you put in, it adds some cost to your infrastructure, and depending on which devices you're going out to, will dictate which DRM you would actually use. Each of these DRMs does not necessarily work everywhere. So, including with HBO, that's something, we've got all 3 flavors. And that's something we have to manage. We have to manage license servers for all 3. We have to wrap all assets. And sometimes the same asset, if it's going to one device, it needs to have one type of DRM, but the same asset or movie or show going to a different device needs a different kind of DRM. There are companies that offer those CMSs and then will convert your content. That will also help you with DRM as well. There's other ways to protect your content. Usually, most of the time that involves the CDN. Again, the folks that are actually helping to deliver your content, they store it and then they deliver it to your viewers at home. They can encrypt that delivery. They can make sure that if you only want it allowed in Brazil, they can make sure that, that you don't have to do anything on your player to make that happen, that the person's internet connection actually has to be in Brazil for them to have access to the content. You can also encrypt the delivery as well, depending on the device you're going out to or the flavor. And that's just to make sure that it doesn't protect it once it's on the device, but it does protect the transmission of that out. And these are just things that you need to be concerned about if you're trying to, especially as you're trying to develop distribution agreements with different companies out there. If you're just selling it direct, you can decide it's your content, you're the only one who's making money off of it, you're the only one who really cares. If you don't want DRM, don't do it. But it might mean that somebody takes your content and shares it, and if you're okay with that, that's fine. If you're not, and you definitely can't have that content shared, you need to concern yourself with DRM. Keep an eye on MPEG-Dash. It's a new standard that is going out right now for the segmentation and delivery of video. And in France right now, we've actually had a mandate in France that certain devices have to receive this flavor of video. And it's not a codec, it's just the way that the video is chopped up and the way that the playlist works and the way that the devices use those playlists. It's something that you got to keep an eye on. And again, you know, that's something that we'll always have to keep an eye on, right? Is that just because I've been delivering video out in a certain way doesn't mean that at a certain point the laws don't change, and I have to accommodate for that. One example in the US of that is closed captioning. I believe within a few months, anything that we show on one of our linear channels that has closed captioning, when it goes to HBO Go or any other place on the web or over-the-top style into set-top boxes, Xboxes, PlayStations, whatever it is, that'll have to display that closed captioning as well. And so we've actually had to go through our entire library again to redo everything to accommodate for that closed captioning. You got to keep up on that stuff. And some of this stuff, you know, I don't need to say this stuff to, these things that I'm saying, it's not to scare you out of trying to get your video out there to people. It's more that you need to think about it, and frankly, if you don't build it yourself and you do find a place that's cost effective for you to help you out with this, the onus is often on them. They're the ones that often are doing the development and are ready to adapt to the changing laws and the changing needs of the customers and the viewers. Distribution agreements. It's you know, at least for a company like HBO, this is it's the double-edged sword for us, right? It's mandated that HBO, I think, I don't want to say that we would make as much money selling HBO Go direct to anybody, because I don't think that's the case. But that's what everyone wants. We just can't do it because we make billions of dollars a year, and that money comes from the MSOs right now. So if we shut that off, if we did something to destroy or ruin those agreements, we would hope all of you would start paying us directly for HBO, because we'd quickly go out of business.